la, la. Rocky mountain, rocky ridge, stand in the prairie grass and pray for rain. In the fifth pane of my window, I can see the northern star. So dark outside my window, it calms my restless heart, calms my restless heart. And all the dust upon my boots, and all the endless miles, and all the doors that I've passed through, I think I'll rest a while, I think I'll rest a while, rest these bones a while. Yes, I'll rest a while. La, 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 la. Must have been the solstice light that lit the golden leaves. It could have been the barnyard owl that brought these memories, that brought these memories. And all the dust upon my boots, and all the endless miles, and all the doors that I've passed through, I think I'll rest a while, I think I'll rest a while, rest these bones a while. Yes, I'll rest a while. La, 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 la. Rocky mountain, rocky ridge, stand in the prairie grass and pray for rain. In the fifth pane of my window, I can see the northern star. So dark outside my window, it calms my restless heart, calms my restless heart. La, 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 la. the dust upon my boots, and all the endless miles, and all the doors that I've passed through, I think I'll rest a while. I think I'll rest a while. Rest these bones a while. Yes, I'll rest a while. La 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 la. Must have been the solstice light that lit the golden leaves. It could have been the barnyard owl that brought these memories, brought these memories. And all the dust upon my boots, and all the endless miles, and all the doors that I've passed through, I think I'll rest a while. I think I'll rest a while. Rest these bones a while. Yes, I'll rest a while. La 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 la. Rocky mountain, rocky ridge, stand in the prairie grass and pray for rain. In the fifth pane of my window, I can see the northern star, so dark outside my window, it calms my restless heart, calms my restless heart. And all the dust upon my boots, and all the endless miles, and all the doors that I've passed through, I think I'll rest a while. I think I'll rest a while. Rest these bones a while. Yes, I'll rest a while. La 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 la.
See, I can relate. Not a soul. My lips are sealed. Well, they are. Exactly.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Okay, that's more like it, yes. Need lots of energy to get us going this morning. Please find your seats and prepare for this morning's service. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Columbia. My name is Richard McLeod, and I am your service leader for the day. Let me remind you first, and for those of you that are in the sanctuary, that up here there's a lot more people watching. And so and those of you who are watching this service, we're glad you're here. We wish you were here in Purchase, but in Purchase. Public. I'm not doing well this morning, pardon me. Anyhow, we wish you were here in person. Please make sure to read the announcements in your printed order of service. Also, and especially, be sure and read the weekly events that are mailed to you each Thursday, as well as the unigram and on the website. We actually even urge you to keep the website open. It's our website, it's your website, and so that can keep you up on what's happening. Please practice COVID restrictions that are currently in place that have been set by the board guidelines. That means that we have to practice social distancing, and wearing a mask is highly recommended. Now, let me tell you, I have more announcements than usual this morning. We do not like to do announcements during this part of the service. We like to have them published beforehand, but some folks have told me to make these announcements, and they say that there's urgency, and they did offer me a bribe to do this. And I do want to remind you that all bribes must be paid in cash. Quick announcement from the social action folks. Please check out the table in the social hall for information and sign-ups. There's Side with Love t-shirts available, and preparations for our float on the Gay Pride Parade. And I was supposed to say something else, Kevin, about...
Also, letter writing table for social action for vote forward, get the vote out kind of thing.
Okay, letter writing table, social action, back there after the service. Now, this is important for those who have been greatly concerned with this. We are missing our floor and table easels. So if you recently used them and you know where they are, please return them to us as soon as possible. Bring them in, set them somewhere, we'll take care of them from there. They are needed for some upcoming events. And here's a reminder for parents. This is not an announcement, this is just a reminder. If you need to occupy your young folks, we do have toys and books in the back of the social hall. Is that true? I said that, I got that in here, and then I realized, Jonathan, is that true? Well, anyhow, I think it is. Today's flowers. Now, this is exciting because you've already noticed the flowers that are up here. Today's flowers are provided by Chuck and Bud Ashley in honor of their birthdays. So, out of order here, but we want to even sing happy birthdays to you. Anna, give me a note. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Bud and Chuck. Happy birthday to you. Okay. Yeah, and we can extend that to anybody else who has a birthday this month, so we don't play favorites, I guess. Okay, and now let us center ourselves for today's service, and remember to silence all electronic devices as we listen to the prelude. Anna?
It's my pleasure this morning to introduce Kevin, as we'll be featuring his new sonatina for trumpet and piano in this morning's service. You may all know Kevin, but there are a few things you might not know about him. He's an active composer, performer, and music teacher based in Camden, South Carolina. And his last CD project, Carolina Maze, is a 14-song album tracked entirely at home. It's available on all digital platforms for purchase and streaming, and keep an eye out for his upcoming album, Damage. Kevin teaches brass instruments, guitar, piano, and songwriting and music theory at the Kershaw County Fine Arts Center. He's frequently heard performing on trumpet, guitar, or as a vocalist in the Carolina Midlands and beyond. Previous to his move to Camden, he had been choir director at the UU Congregation of Gwinnett in Metro Atlanta from 2007 to 2016. He's equally at home in classical and popular contexts, with performance experience in symphonic and chamber music, jazz, rock, Latin, and show music, and a catalog of compositions spanning the gamut from avant-garde to folk. Kevin holds a Doctor of Musical Arts degree from the University of Georgia and has performed or recorded with Atlanta bands Mandarico, the likes of which Jazzorama, the Bill Page Quintet, the Jeff Long Ensemble, and King Learjet, as well as with the pit band at Lawrenceville's Aurora Theater, and now for the Kershaw Fine Arts Center.
And Anna said that if I put my classical hat on, I could actually get to talk about the piece a little bit. So before I attempt to play it, this is a sonata in 3 movements, and we'll be kind of interspersing the movements throughout the service. All 3 of them were kind of informed by the climate crisis, which is an obsession of mine and certainly something in evidence last summer when I was writing this. So I think what was in my mind when I was writing that first movement, because you write the thing and then you make sense of it afterwards, right? So you don't, it's not like you have this elaborate plan of, I'm going to convey this idea, but the image that ended up in my mind with this movement was of an early morning dream. You're half awake and you're remembering something familiar, but it's all modified and strange and unpredictable in fantastic ways. And that's kind of what the climate crisis is doing to our world, actually, in front of our eyes. So, dreams of an overheated morning. Musically, this is a parody of the second movement of the Haydn Trumpet Concerto, which I love with all my being. So this is a parody, but it's the most affectionate possible parody of that piece, which I also commend to you.
Thank you, Kevin, Anna, and Joseph Haydn. Please stand and join me in the congregational covenant as found in your order of service. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve others in community. Thus do we covenant with one another. Thank you. Please be seated. Our minister is the Reverend Stephen Robinson, and on those Sundays when Stephen is not in the pulpit, we present a variety of interesting speakers from this congregation or from recognized guests from the wider community. Unitarian Universalism is a diverse and non-creedal religion. We are a covenantal religion, which means we don't have to believe the same in order to treat each other the same, with respect, equity, compassion, and dignity. Our community is based on deeds, not creeds. As Unitarian Universalists, we side with love, embracing all people regardless of age, color, race, socioeconomic status, physical ability, or religious background. We have been officially designated by the Unitarian Universalist Association as a welcoming congregation, which means we welcome LGBTQ plus individuals. We especially invite families and young children. We even have a nursery. We encourage everyone to wear name tags so that we may know each other better. Board members wear green name tags, and they always welcome your comments, questions, and suggestions. Well, not always, but usually welcome your comments and suggestions. Board members, if you're here, yeah, if you're here, stand up. If you're not here, don't stand up. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that right. Board members, stand up, wave at everybody so you can be recognized. Now, we would like to, at this moment, recognize any guests or visitors who are with us today. And we hope that you've filled out a visitor card, and we promise nobody will come see you uninvited. There should be a visitor card in the back of the chair in front of you. This will let us send you newsletters, emails, and things like that. So, visitors, whoever willing and able, would you like to stand and introduce yourselves? Visitors, anybody? The Cloud family. Yeah, we met earlier.
Yes. I'm Jessica Cloud, and we have, what's your name?
My name is Thomas Whitman.
Thomas.
No doubt.
Emmy.
And I'm Daniel Cloud.
We recently moved back to South Carolina. We visited here about 12 years ago and just moved back to Hartsville. Before that, we were living in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and had a strong UU background for the past 7 years, not only on the board of my church there, but also working for Star King School for the Ministry, one of our two UU seminaries.
All right, welcome. Welcome to the Cloud family. And my name, MacLeod, we're not really related here, but MacLeod does mean son of, well, not Cloud, but close enough, okay? Yeah, Emily, John.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Emily Doreen White.
And I'm John Dorian White.
Our son, Arlo, is 2.5, and he's in the nursery today. We've been in Columbia for 3 years, but and we've been wanting to come. Been following on Zoom here and there, but finally feeling ready to branch out with our little guy. So thanks for having us.
Yes, very welcome.
My name is Riley Lanier, and this is my wife, Cynthia. And we're visiting this morning from the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spartanburg. and I'm here to visit my sister who's been coming here fairly regularly.
Okay, all right, welcome. Welcome, very welcome. Coming through again.
All right.
Hi, my name is Judy Turnipseed. I'm here after 2.5 years of not being here. And what drew me here today was Ken Perkins, who lives in Laurel Crest with me, and this is Tom Gasquey, who also is from there. You want to say anything?
Thank you for allowing me to be here. I feel welcome. Thank you.
Okay, nice group of visitors today. So glad to have you all. Now, let me tell you about our chalice lighter for the day. And you'll see in your program, the chalice lighter is to be Karen Peters. Karen called me early this morning from a doctor's office, and she did not sound very well. So I'm going to be a stand-in for her because she gave me such a nice script to read for her, and we'll put her back in as chalice lighter another time. But we wish her well. Today's chalice lighter is Karen Peters. She grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, and attended the university there as a music major. You will very often see her playing viola here, along with Anna. She was brought up in the Lutheran Church, and while living in Orlando, Florida, she started to attend Unitarian services. When she and her husband, Elliot, moved to Columbia, she stopped in at our UU in the spring of 2017. Gloria Talcove welcomed her and took her under a wing. She became a member in 2018, and she says to tell you, so this is the part that's to you, so listen to this. I'm extremely grateful for this special community of friends, for the opportunities for service and growth, and for the numerous musical opportunities. My life has been blessed and enhanced by all of you. So I'm going to light this candle, this chalice, on her behalf. Spirit of light, Spirit of life, come unto us.
Our opening hymn is number 360, Here We Have Gathered. You'll find it in your gray hymnal. I invite you to stand as you're willing and able to join in singing, and remind you to please wear your mask when joining in congregational singing. Words to this hymn in our hymnal are by Alicia S. Carpenter.
Thank you. Please be seated. It is a duty of the worship committee to schedule guest speakers when the minister is not in the pulpit. We present a variety of inspirational, entertaining, and today a very educational speaker. So it is my privilege to introduce today's guest, Dr. Kenneth Perkins. Dr. Perkins received his MA and PhD in Near Eastern Studies from Princeton University. He is an emeritus professor of history at the University of South Carolina, having served on the faculty from 1974 until his retirement in 2008. There, he taught courses on Islamic civilization, the history of Middle East and North Africa in the Islamic era, and U.S. relations with the Middle East region. A frequent traveler to the area, Dr. Perkins has conducted scholarly research in Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, and Sudan. He has lectured extensively in university settings and other public forums. He is the author of, and you had to teach me how to pronounce some of these words, so bear with me here. He's the author of Cayads, Captains, and Colons, French military administration in the colonial Maghreb, 1844 to 1934, that was published in 1981. He's the author of Port Sudan, The Evolution of a Colonial City, 1993. He's the author of The Maghreb in Question, 1997, and A History of Modern Tunisia, published in 1904. He has contributed a chapter on modern North Africa and for the New Cambridge History of Islam. His newest edition of Modern Tunisia in 2014 brings the study through the revolution of 2011 and subsequent elections. He is also currently at work on a book examining the social, economic, and political impact of Western travelers in the Middle East from the 1950s to 1939. Let me take a little breath here. We don't intend normally for the introductions to be longer than what the sermon may be, but we're just glad to have him with us. So I think now I'm going to just turn this over to you for your opening words.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you all for being here this morning. My opening words are not my own. They are taken from the Encyclopedia Britannica, and as opening words probably should, they sort of lay out the foundation for what I intend to talk about in a few minutes. So let me read this piece from the Encyclopedia Britannica. In 1904, France had concluded a secret treaty with Spain, partitioning Morocco, and also agreed not to oppose Britain's moves in Egypt in exchange for a free hand in Morocco. Germany had, however, insisted on an open-door policy. The Emperor Wilhelm II visited Tangier, and from his yacht, which was anchored in the harbor, endorsed the idea of Moroccan independence and an open door for all of the powers in Morocco. That visit stirred a real fury in Europe, where many of the great powers of the time were interested in Morocco and in its fate, and set in motion what's often called the First Moroccan Crisis. That crisis was temporarily resolved in 1906 at the Algeciras Conference, which was held in Spain. It argued for and laid the groundwork for Germany's rights in Morocco, but also those of other countries, and left France and Spain with the powers of police in Morocco. So that's what I want to say for starters. Come back to some of that, but I guess the point that I'll leave you with now is that Morocco was the scene of a great deal of interest on the part of European powers, not all of it benign. So more to come. But I would like now to invite any of the children who are here who would like to, and anyone who feels, marginally childish this morning, to come and have a seat up here, and I'm going to read an Arabic story, which is from a collection of such stories called Kalila wa Dimna. So these are very popular in the Arab world. They originally come from Sanskrit. So I'm going to read to make sure that I have it down right. Welcome. Good. Nice. I haven't read stories to a group of children in a very long time, but I always like doing that. So, once upon a time, as all stories have to start, in a very thick forest, there lived a lion and a wolf, a lion, a wolf, and a fox. And they were the best of friends. The lion, of course, was the king of the group, and the others served as his advisors, but they all did everything together. And one of the things that they all did together was to hunt together. And the lion was always in charge, but the wolf and the fox always gave him advice and recommendations and told him what they thought would be a good thing to do. And they shared the food, but they always let the lion eat first because he was, after all, the king. So he got to eat first of all. And things went along very nicely until one day there was a terrible forest fire. And most of the animals that lived in the forest had to run away. They had to go somewhere else to find shelter and find a place where they would be safe. But the lion and the fox and the wolf stayed on. And they continued going about their lives as they always had, but they found their hunting not very successful. There were no animals left in the forest, so there was nothing for them to hunt and nothing for them to eat. And that obviously distressed them very much, and they were very hungry. You can imagine that might be so. But then, one day while they were walking through the forest, all three of them together, they came upon a zebra and a gazelle and a rabbit who were all in a little clearing in the forest taking a nap. And the big animals, the lion and the fox and the wolf, got very excited because they thought now they'd get something to eat. And the lion said to them, "You stay here, stay out of sight, and I'll take care of this." And so the lion went out and pounced on these three smaller animals and killed all of them. So there was now enough food to have a very, very great feast. The lion came back and he said, "Now we have to decide how we will divide all of this food that we have now. So, Wolf, how do you think we should divide this food? And the wolf said, well, Lion, you are the king, so you should have the zebra, which is the biggest bit of food. And then I will have the gazelle, because I'm a big animal as well. And Fox can have the rabbit, because he's kind of small. Well, the lion didn't like that very much. He sort of growled and scowled and looked at the wolf. And he took his paw, the lion took his big paw and just swiped the wolf. And he swiped him and pushed him right into the river. And he floated away down the river, and nobody ever saw him again. So then the lion turned to the fox and said, well, Fox, how do you think we should divide up all of this food that we now have? And the fox said, Your Majesty, Sir Lion, what I think is that you, the lion, should have the zebra for breakfast, and you should have the gazelle for lunch, and you should have the rabbits for dinner. That's how I think the food should be divided. And the lion really liked that, of course. And he smiled and said, that's a good idea. He said, but tell me, Fox, how did you get so smart and so wise to figure out such a difficult question? And the fox said, the wisdom descended upon me when I saw the treatment that the wolf got when he gave his answer. So that's the story of the lion, the wolf, and the fox. And there's a lot of stuff to think about in there, so you should think about some of that. You want to ask a question? Yeah? Sure. Okay. Well, that's the end. You don't have to ask any other questions unless you want to, but you can think on that.
Dismissed to classes now. We have classes going on in the back. Good. So somebody will show you the way to go. Good-looking group this morning. Nice story. You know, we have to be reminded that these services are streamed on YouTube, but they're also available for you to watch later. So if you want to go back and listen to this story again, or if you want to go back and listen to any part of any service that we've done, just sign on to YouTube. You got it. It's now time for our candles of community. If you have a significant joy, sorrow, or concern that you would like to have shared with the congregation, please phone or email Andrea, our administrator, by noon on Friday. But if you would like to speak for yourself from a microphone here, just pick up one of the candles in the basket on the entry table as you come in and come forward to speak briefly when requested. And for those of you, if you're on streaming, and again, if you want us to read something for you, just send it in to Andrea and I will read it from here. So those of you who have taken the candle, please come forward.
Hey, I'm Bethany, and normally I'm pretty quick about respecting the time up here. This one's going to be a little challenging, so bear with me. This candle is first for the USC professor who was battling her own monsters and felt the only solution was to take her life way too soon. This is also for her family and friends who are going to forever battle with their own monsters of, could they have seen it? Could they have stopped it? Should they have known? And this is where it gets complicated. A lot of you know that the past 2.5 years I've been up here because my son has had his own battles, my youngest. And last Sunday, he came up and shared about his journey, and I thought, oh my God, he's on his way. He's back in school, he's doing good. This is a kid I remember. But Drew was the last student with that teacher. He stayed late. She was his lab instructor in chemistry. He liked her. He stayed late to ask questions and help her clean the room. Now, some of you are going to think that this is wonky, and some of you are going to be like, yeah, I get this. I know it. If you believe in these kind of things, think of him right now. I think he's still sleeping. Think of him right now. Think of that energy in your heart and send it to him. He's chosen self-medication to deal with his monsters, and he's had a lot of them. The past 2.5 years has had a lot for a young man. And dangerous behaviors. Send him some energy. Help him to reach out for professional help. USC is offering it. It's right there. Just send that energy, and when I see him next, hopefully he'll have like this epiphany. And you don't even know, it all came from here, from all this good energy, because you people have been with me these past 2.5 years. I've gotten so many pats on my shoulder and knowing looks and people coming up and talking to me, giving me some advice. So those of you who are new here, you know that this is a really great community, a community that loves and shares and helps. And I know I'm in a good place, and I want my son to be there too. So send him some energy and keep that family and friends of the USC professor in your hearts as well. Thank you.
I'm Linda McLeod, and as a tribute this Labor Day, I'm lighting this candle for my father, Preston Lyle Bonney. During the late 40s and early 50s, he was instrumental in organizing the local International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Union, known as the IBEW Local 191. This was in Everett, the county seat of Snohomish County, Washington. This was at a time when there was no union organization in our county, and the need was great. As a master electrician, Daddy served as the president of the local union and representative to the Washington State IBEW. The founding of this union led to fair pay, improved working conditions, a small retirement plan, health insurance, and paid vacations. As a result of this, my memories go back to a very young age, surrounded with conversations about labor unions and politics.
I'm Linda Brennison, and I have a joy and a gratitude, a great feeling of gratitude. And it is for one person who unselfishly just motioned me on up here, Mrs. Joan Watterson. She has a candle too, but she said, "You go first, Linda." Very typical of Joan, but my gratitude and joy for Joan is that Joan is one of those people who is so responsible and dependable that you take them for granted. For years, I don't know how many years, she has been the coordinator of our counters. You may never think about this when you come and enjoy one of our services, but some people have to collect the offering after the service, stay after the service, count the offering, make a deposit, and take it to the bank, and all of those sort of things. It has to happen every Sunday. It has to be done by two unrelated people and two different people every Sunday, and someone has to coordinate that. And that is what Joan does, and I'm ever so grateful for her and all the other unseen and unsung heroes of UUCC. So thank you.
Well, I'm Joan, and I'm humbled, Linda, thank you. But this candle is for these two people here. I want you all to stand up. This is for Bud and Chuck Ashley. Turn around and look. There are some of us that are celebrating along with you because we appreciate all the color and morality and fun that you have brought to the UU.
Light one. Okay. And we light one candle for those joys and concerns that remain private and silent in our hearts. Now, to ponder these joys and concerns that you've just been presented with here, let's just take just a moment of silent meditation. It's now time for our offering, our sharing of our own abundance. This congregation contributes to Share the Plate, where half of our cash collection each Sunday goes to local charities, which is our way of giving back to our local community. This month's Share the Plate recipient is the Harriet Hancock LGBT Center, which is a hub of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender activity in the Midlands. Their facility offers a variety of resources, including a free lending library, meeting spaces for LGBT supportive groups, and a directory of LGBT-friendly businesses, organizations, and counselors, while also serving as the headquarters for the South Carolina Pride movement. The center will be represented by Matt Butler on September 11th and 25th, not today. So if you wish to contribute to this, just write on your check, Share the Plate in the memo line, or you also may make an online contribution. And those of you who are on streaming, please feel free. You may also make a contribution online. You'll find this link on the UUC website, uucolumbia.org. So will the ushers please come forward?
while they are coming forward, a couple of remarks on this. Passacaglia, which is the form of this movement, is a composition in which there's a repeating bass pattern. So if you want to listen for that, you'll hear that throughout. And this is kind of modeled loosely after a Handel Passacaglia in the form of the slow dance called a saraband, whereas the title is cribbed from Bob Dylan.
If love is indeed the doctrine of this congregation, your generosity and your giving today exhibits your love for this self-sustaining congregation and its programs and missions. So we receive these gifts with gratitude and appreciation. And it's my privilege now to again introduce Dr. Kenneth Perkins.
Thank you. Can I move this up a bit so I can see what's on the screen a little bit better? Just move it so I can see what, or tilt it maybe. That's great. That's great. Thank
Look
you.
all right?
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you. My last bit of rearrangement to your sanctuary, I promise. I understand that accommodating all of this has taken some rearranging, and I am grateful for that, and I hope you'll think that it was worthwhile at the end of the day. So I mentioned before how there was a great deal of European interest in Morocco at the beginning of the 20th century, as there had been for a considerable time before that. But looking at this map gives a very clear idea, I think, of why that was so. The northern edge of Morocco is situated right on the Strait of Gibraltar, which of course separates Africa from Europe, a body of water that at its narrowest point is only about 7.5 miles wide. So that gave Morocco tremendous strategic importance. Morocco had been an independent kingdom for almost a millennium by the time the 20th century began. It was weak, to be sure, and we'll see what some of the consequences of that weakness was. Spain also had an obvious interest in this region and in Morocco in particular. Indeed, Spain and Morocco had been part of the same political entity for many, many hundreds of years in the Middle Ages and beyond, and before as well. So Morocco, which sat on the other side of the straits, clearly had an interest in all of this. And then, if we sort of mentally extend that map further to the east, France was interested in Morocco because France had begun building a colonial empire across the northern rim of Africa as early as 1830, when the French conquered and began to rule Algeria. And they had extended that colonial rule from Algeria further eastward into Tunisia. And so it was pretty clear to almost everybody that Morocco would be an object of ongoing French interest as well. It was kind of the missing piece that the French needed to fill in their imperial holdings in North Africa. So, as mentioned, there was an enormous amount of interest on the part of the European powers in what transpired in Morocco. Now, if we could look at the next slide, please. I mentioned Germany and Wilhelm II when I made my introductory remarks. And these postage stamps, these are German postage stamps used or intended for use in Germany. But these are Germany's first real step towards staking a claim in Morocco. And that's an interesting observation that I'll make and carry on through this whole talk. Postage stamps always have a story to tell. They're little pieces of public relations and publicity. And with these stamps, Germany, and you can see that each one of the stamps is overprinted. The original stamp has an imprint across it, and it says on both of them, Morocco, in the German spelling of the word. And if you look at this image on the left, you can see a bit of the postmark, which shows that it was postmarked in Tangier. which was the site of the Kaiser's visit. So these postage stamps are Germany's way of saying, we're interested in this piece of territory as well, and we have a claim to lay out. Now, if we could go on to the next. Morocco, at this point, although it was independent, and as I mentioned before, weak, did not really have an effective postal system. European countries had developed postal systems as early as the 1840s. But Morocco and other parts of the North African and Middle Eastern world really did not. But what Morocco did have was a pretty large contingent of European residents. Most of them were merchants, business people, involved in commerce of one kind or another with Morocco. There were diplomats. There were beginning to be a handful of missionaries. And all of the European powers had post offices in Morocco, usually in Tangier, because that was the most accessible city. And these are some examples of foreign, specifically French, post offices and the stamps that they used. And you can see, again, these are French stamps, but they're intended solely for use in Morocco. And you can tell that because if you look at the bottom of the stamp on the right, you'll see that it says Maroc, M-A-R-O-C, French word for Morocco. And the one on the left is the same. Both of them have been overprinted for use at the Tangier International Post Office. Another example, if we go on, of the same sort of thing, here are two more of these stamps intended for, well, here's one more, I'm sorry, of these stamps intended for use at a foreign post office. And this is the one on the right, and it's an interesting example because it celebrates, you can see, this is a British stamp, overstamped 1857, 1957 Tangier. And it was early on in the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, the current queen. And you can see her image on that stamp. But the 1857, 1957 tells us that Great Britain already had a 100-year involvement of this kind of foreign post office arrangement. Now, the image on the left sort of breaks the chain here of foreign post offices, but it's an interesting one. King Charles II of Great Britain was married for a time to a woman named Catherine of Braganza, who was a Portuguese background and a princess. Typical European marriage among monarchs and princesses. Catherine of Braganza brought with her a very unusual dowry when she and Charles married. She brought with her, as part of her dowry, the port of Tangier and the port of Bombay. Very, very nice thing to tuck away in your trousseau, I guess. That image of them is to remind us that there was a period when Tangier was actually an English settlement. The Moroccans, as you might imagine, didn't care for that, and they rather quickly organized a military expedition, laid siege to the city, and eventually forced the British to withdraw. But the point that I'm making with all of these is this extended foreign interest in the city. And we'll see more of that by moving on to the next slide. If you put all of that foreign interest together with what I was talking about in my introductory remarks, you will not be surprised to learn that Morocco was rather quickly in the early 20th century divided up between two of the powers that had not only a strong interest, but a certain proximity to Morocco, and that was France and Spain. I should point out at this point also that Britain's interest, even after the Moroccans expelled the British forces from Tangier, Britain's interest was across the strait. It was in Gibraltar. And you can see Gibraltar. The best possible image and picture that you can have of Gibraltar is sailing through the Strait of Gibraltar, and you can see Gibraltar from Tangier on a clear day, and it very often is still clear enough to be able to see that. So that was Britain's interest in all this. But when it came time to divvy up the prize, as it were, Morocco was divided into a French protectorate, which covered most of the country, and that's what's on the map on the right-hand side of the screen, and a Spanish protectorate. This began in 1912 on the left-hand side of the screen. I should add that one disadvantage of this kind of presentation that relies pretty heavily on maps, doesn't matter so much with the stamp images, but it does with maps, is that scale matters. And these two maps are of different scales. The Spanish protectorate in the northern part of Morocco extended for about 150 miles, hugging the Mediterranean coast from the area of Tangier to the east. And it actually, on this image, looks as if it's as big as or bigger than the French protectorate, which you see on the right, but the French protectorate was maybe 500, 550 miles from north to south and longer than that from east to west. So maps, while they are useful and critical often to displaying things, can be deceptive, and you have to be careful of them in that regard. So with that warning, can we move on to the next image? And I've called this scrambling to get the details in place. So it's 1912, and now France has an internationally recognized claim to Morocco through a protectorate government, a French government that would theoretically protect the interests of the Moroccan rulers. And Spain has a similar arrangement in their part of the country. But this happened pretty quickly, and they weren't entirely prepared for this to happen. And so these two postage stamps, the one on the left is a French one, the one on the right is a Spanish one, and they were pretty hastily printed up and then overprinted with the phrase French protectorate or with the Spanish spelling of the word Morocco on the image on the right. In other words, when the French and Spanish began their political control over Morocco, they weren't quite ready, and they had to scramble to get these Spanish and French stamps appropriately overprinted so they could be used in Morocco. If we could go on, please. So from 1912, when the protectorates were set in place, both of these countries, both France and Spain, began issuing postage stamps on behalf of Morocco, French and Spanish stamps. And I'll just say a short word about this. The images and postage stamps, as I said before, are public relations. They're publicity, because they're going to go out of the country and they can be seen in other countries. And the images on the left honor the man who's generally regarded as the founder of the Moroccan protectorate, a man named Hubert Lyautey, who was a Marechal de France, a French military officer, a very distinguished career before coming to Morocco, and the originator of the Moroccan protectorate. And he was highly thought of by the many French settlers who came and lived in Morocco. The images on the right, it's a whole series of French stamps for Morocco, and they are typical, and we'll see further images as we go along, of the kinds of stamps that were used in Europe's colonial holdings. They are what is sometimes referred to in French as scénotypes, scenes and types of places and people in these new territories that, in this case, the French had taken over. Very few French people in France itself had had the opportunity to visit Morocco. Maybe some of them had relatives who had gone to Morocco as settlers and farmers or businessmen. And so this is a way of telling the folks back home what Morocco is like. Typical images, and I know that they're too small to really be able to see, but a good example of what I've also called on here picturesque and historic Morocco, and that's what these scénotypes things are trying to illustrate. So the next slide will show us a Spanish Moroccan counterpart. The Spaniards in their protectorate did exactly the same things. They put on their stamps images of public works projects, of development projects. The Spanish zone of Morocco was very undeveloped at the time that the protectorate began. So on the right, you see this image of a railroad train, and that's the Spanish rulers saying, we're helping this country come along and develop, and we're building railroads, and all of the other stamps in the set are similar kinds of things. Again, meant to be sent to the folks back home so that people in Spain itself would see the good work that their government, I put good work in quotes because I'm a historian of the Arab part of this, and the Arabs didn't necessarily think it was good work, but of the good work that the protectorate rulers were doing. So advancing one more. In addition to the French protectorate and the Spanish protectorate, there was an incredibly anomalous third region, which was Tangier itself, the city of Tangier. And I looked up a little bit of acreage on this, and the city of Tangier was about as big as the city of Columbia in extent, physical extent. So it's a very small area right there on the strait. But it was ruled for many, many years from up until 1960, from 1924 to 1960. It was under international administration, and there were 6 or 8 countries, all of whom contributed a member to an international board, a sort of city council that ran the city, and among other things, issued its own postage stamps, like the one that you see on the left-hand slide there. And it is a stamp from Tangier. It was a city-state for this time. But Tangier, because it was ruled by everybody, was really ruled by nobody. And so it became a kind of wide-open city, a city that was known for vice and illicit gambling and prostitution and all kinds of other illegalities which could flourish sort of between the cracks of this rather odd arrangement of the international city. And it attracted a great many Americans and Europeans who most mainstream people of the time would have dismissed as, well, they dismissed them as beatniks. These were people literally of the beat generation. And this is a picture of a number of them, some of whose names at least you will recognize. William Burroughs, the author of Naked Lunch, spent a great deal of time in Tangier. Jack Kerouac, the On the Road book, spent a great deal of time in Tangier before authoring On the Road. The gentleman on the bottom of the picture in the suit, who looks a little bit out of place, is a man named Paul Bowles. If you're familiar with some contemporary fiction, Bowles was a novelist who wrote extensively about Morocco. Probably his most famous novel is called The Sheltering Sky. But he was also a very distinguished composer, and he and his wife, Jane Bowles, who's not in this picture, ran a sort of salon in this wide open city of Tangier. And one other person whose name you will recognize is Allen Ginsberg. Allen Ginsberg is the second from the left here, standing next to William Burroughs. Allen Ginsberg, the beat poet. So Tangier was a really strange and curious and interesting place with all of the, it was kind of, I don't know if this analogy really carries out, I just thought of it. Maybe it's Tijuana on the Mediterranean or something like that. I don't think Tijuana was ever, well, I don't know if it was ever as wide open as Tangier was. Tangier was pretty wild. So if we can go on. All through this time when France and Spain had divided up Morocco into their own two protectorates, there were other territories deep in the south of Morocco, on the edges of the desert, which Spain held on to even after Morocco became independent in 1956. It clung to these territories, not so much, well, they had some economic utility. There were, in the deep south, vast deposits of phosphates, which doesn't sound very exciting, and phosphates aren't very exciting, probably, unless you're a chemist, maybe. But it was a very lucrative and productive industry. So you can see on this map, the Spanish holdings are that up to 1956 are in pink up on the top, but it's the red, the dark red holdings further to the south. These are areas that the Spaniards clung to even after Moroccan independence in 1956. And they clung to them, among other reasons, because of the man on the image on the right, Francisco Franco, the longtime dictator of Spain. Now, Spain's history as a colonial power was, at least in the 19th and 20th century, not very distinguished. They lost most of their colonies in the course of the Spanish-American War, and they were sort of at the bottom of the heap of European colonizers. And Franco regarded these last remaining Moroccan holdings as sort of Spain's last grip on being able to call itself a colonial power. And a lot of people might think that not calling yourself a colonial power would be a good thing. But a lot of people in this era thought that colonialism was pretty much a kind of natural order of things. So Spain continued to hold on to these colonies. Could we move to the next, please? This is a small self-indulgence because one of these colonies was deep in the south of Morocco at a place called Sidi Ifni. I come to part of this interest by having collected stamps since I was a child. And I'm quite certain that it's because of collecting stamps that I'm an historian. And so there are a lot of connections and interactions. But I've lived in Morocco on a number of occasions for extended periods of time. And the last place that I lived there, my wife was teaching English at the university, was in a place called Agadir. And these images are from a city south of Agadir. Agadir is about 400, 500 miles south of Casablanca or south of Tangier. And these are images of Sidi Ifni, which was a favorite place for us to go. So I'm indulging myself with a picture, and this is the only picture in here that I actually took, of the sort of seaside promenade at Ifni. That picture would have been taken in 2003. And Ifni was still very decidedly a Spanish town. It's totally surrounded by Morocco, and it's very small, but the Spaniards were clinging to it. And the image on the right, the Spaniards, not a lot of people are aware of this, but the Spaniards had a foreign legion just like the French did, and it operated in many of the same ways that the French did. That is, you couldn't be Spanish to be in the Spanish Legion. You had to be an expatriate and join it. But the Spanish Legion was still functioning and still exists, although it's pared down to almost nothing, and there are no longer any Spanish overseas holdings. But it was a big part. It was a big part of Franco's effort to hold on to these last remaining enclaves of Spanish rule. So the next slide, please. This is just another image of another place in southern Morocco. The Moroccans call it Tarfaya. So again, on the Atlantic coast, and a place that was easy for us to visit while we were living in Agadir. And this is a stamp. You can see on the top, it says Morocco, Marruecos. It's a stamp of the Spanish Protectorate, and it's been overstamped in Spanish, Cape Juby, J-U-B-Y. The French call this, or the Moroccans, French-speaking Moroccans, call this territory Tarfaya. The Spaniards, called it Cape Juby. So another example of the same thing. But now to the next slide, please. The biggest of these holdings that Spain clung to, I've used that word half a dozen times in the last half a dozen minutes, sorry. But they were clinging to them, and the largest of these territories was called Spanish Sahara. And these are postage stamps from Spanish Sahara. And they illustrate a kind of evolution in the way that Spain was looking at these territories. On the left, you see a camel herder, and this area is desert. It's in the Sahara. And so that's one of these typical scène type kind of motifs for Spanish Sahara early on in its colonization. On the right, you have a much later stamp from Spanish Sahara when this urge to pull these territories into Spain, administer them more tightly, and to not have them seem like such outliers. And I find this stamp very amusing. It's a Spanish stamp for the colony of Spanish Sahara. And of course, you'll recognize that it's Don Quixote and Sancho Panza. And I can guarantee you that neither Don Quixote nor Sancho Panza nor Cervantes ever set foot in the Spanish Sahara and would have not have known what was happening to them if they found themselves there. But it's a way of saying, yes, it's Spanish Sahara, but remember, it is Spanish Sahara. So it's a colonial statement. Next one, please, and I'm coming to the end, I promise you. These are not stamps, obviously, but this situation of Spanish Sahara, this territory remained under Spanish control until 1975. What happened in 1975? Francisco Franco died, and the Moroccans, who had always said that that territory of Spanish Sahara was really theirs, and this is all part of the whole notion of decolonization, and they wanted it back. And so in 1975, when Franco died, the King of Morocco, King Hassan II, organized, and some of you may remember this, an expedition called the Green March. They mobilized Moroccans from all over the country. Hundreds of thousands of Moroccans made their way by truck, and you can see this caravan of trucks, and you can see them gathered. And you get some idea from that image on the right of what a godforsaken place this is. I think lucky. Most people wouldn't think so. I've been lucky to be there and to be on that road and to stand in this area, and it is godforsaken. I mean, there's nothing there but desert. So the Moroccans seized this area through a peaceful, we talk about immigrants conquering us by coming across our southern border. This is what these people were doing, in effect, and it worked. The Moroccans were able to integrate this territory into the Kingdom of Morocco, but there was one problem. Well, there were a lot of problems, but there was one problem that's worth noting before we move on to the last slide, and that problem was that there were already people living there in this area. It doesn't look like there would be, but there were lots of people. They were nomads, like that camel driver that we saw on one of those first slides from the Spanish Sahara. There were people living there, and they didn't especially want to be ruled by Morocco. They didn't consider themselves Moroccans, most of them. They considered themselves Saharans, Sahrawi in the Arabic dialect. And they were not interested in, they were eager to get rid of the Spanish, but they weren't interested in turning in the Spanish for Moroccan colonialism or imperialism. And so these people these Sahrawis, organized resistance, including a militant armed resistance, against the Moroccan takeover. Now, the final slide, please. So that happened initially in 1975. There was a real shooting war for a long time, which was indecisive in its outcome. And the issue, amazingly enough, lingers till now. Morocco claims this territory, it administers the territory. Many Moroccans live there, oftentimes as a result of subsidies that are paid to them by the Moroccan state in order to live there, and other perks that they receive. But both Morocco and a smaller entity called the Saharan Arab Democratic Republic, this is the entity that the Sahrawi resistance movement created, both claim this territory. The UN's been involved in this in and out, but that's a long, convoluted story that I'm not going to go into now. But this sort of, these two postage stamps that you see on this image sort of sum this all up, I do call it dueling sovereignties. This is the Kingdom of Morocco and the Saharan Arab Democratic Republic fighting in postage stamps over whose territory this is. On the left, you see a Moroccan stamp that has a map outline that includes the Western, or pulls the Western Sahara right into Moroccan territory, doesn't make any distinction. And on the right, you have a postage stamp showing the flag and the happy people of the Saharan Arab Democratic Republic, sort of saying, not so fast, Morocco. So those are more examples of stamps being used as propaganda, but also as public relations and as advertising and as promotion for the country. So I'm going to stop with that, and I'm just going to briefly thank you again for having me. I hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope that you found it informative, and I hope that maybe some of you go back home and dig out and dust off the stamp albums that you had when you were kids, and maybe, you know, nobody collects stamps anymore. It is a lost hobby. I have I'm sorry, this is not relevant, except that it bugs me. I have a wonderful collection of stamps. Fabulous, collected over the last 45 years. Nobody wants them. Nobody wants to buy them. Nobody wants to take them on to sell. It's gone. It's a hobby that's finished. So anyway, I thank you for being here, and I appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Final movement, not much to say.
Thank you, Anna. And thank you, Dr. Perkins. It's a place in the world that I've never been, but now I feel a little more educated, and when I go there, I'll say, oh yeah, Ken Perkins said this.
When you go there, you'll have a good time.
Yeah, okay, I'll count on that. Okay, we extinguish this chalice at the end of our time here today. May its flame glow gently in our hearts and guide our lives until we are together again. Well, this concludes our service, so thank you for joining us. You're welcome to say, do we have light refreshments in the back today? Somebody tell me. Yes. Okay. So you're welcome to enjoy that in the social hall or go outside. So thank you all. We will see you next week right here or on streaming.
Yes, good.